Chapter 19, Hooked on a Feeling. That Friday night, Natalie, Celeste and I were about to set out from my house to follow the trail of red quattro. We each had a bicycle, a backpack full of food and water, and a single mobile phone between us. Natalie was visibly excited to be following the red trail to her destiny. Celeste was quiet, not talking much as we ate dinner. I was curious to see where this would lead us, but Celeste's nerves made me slightly uneasy. She'd seen a lot in her time running from hunters. It's possible that we should have trusted her destiny contraire instincts for this instance. We'd each given our parents and guardians an alibi. Natalie's dad and Yamitsa were out that night, and so we told my parents and David's that Celeste and I would be studying with Natalie at her house, possibly to become a sleepover. It was a happy, wholesome idea, and it gave us a lot of time to play with. From my front porch, our bike lights flashed into the night. It was autumn now, and the days closed earlier, making way for an unfamiliar chill of darkness. I had originally questioned the logic to do this at night, and did so again as we walked our bikes beyond the edge of my house and into the dark. "So never operate in the night, James," Celeste insisted. "It's why your sister's video is so rare. We don't like for others to see us. I've always wanted that to change. We should be able to be ourselves in daylight." Natalie held her hands out beyond my fence. She held them in the peace sign pose, her fingers twitching with the wind. Her eyes were closed and her nose was up. She let the quattro field envelop her. "All right, let's walk up the street," she said. "I can't sense the trail here, but I have a feeling that it's close by." "If you say so," I said. "Can you feel the trail, Celeste?" "No," she said, "but I think Natalie is right." "All right, fair enough," I agreed, feeling useless. I supplied the snacks of the night, at least. We walked our bikes up my street. Then Natalie led us west, past the local shops and over the railway line. She led us from some instinct, not using her eyes or hands, but letting the forces which guide her string her along. However, once we reached the mouth of Kuvalik Street, her body snapped like a dog, desperate to smell the grass. She kicked herself around, led by her posed hands, to the center of the nature strip. She stood there, eyes closed, fingers twitching, examining something. "Here's the first bit of trail," she said. "This is their quattro, all right, and there's plenty of it. They've gone that way," she pointed down the street. "Towards Kuvalik's house?" I asked. "Seems so," Natalie said. "I sense that too," Celeste said. "I can feel their trail now. It's strong." "Let me see that," I said, bustling past Natalie and Celeste to the spot on the nature strip. I made the pose of my hands and wiggled them around in front of me. I felt absolutely no different. "I want to know how you guys do this stuff. What do you do to sense the quattro here, Natalie?" "Well, I don't know that I can teach it exactly," Natalie ummed. She shot a glance to Celeste, who sighed. "I'm not sure whether you think I'm a better teacher for this. Natalie is clearly more skilled at this," she groaned. "I am?" Natalie's face lit up. "Well, you've taught me so many good lessons already," I said. "You're a great teacher." Celeste smiled. She stepped over to where I was. "All right," she started. She got into position, sensing the field. She considered her words for a minute. I waited patiently. "You're familiar with the feeling of quattro in your body, oui?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "Well, all you have to do is feel it outside of your body." My face scrunched. "Okay, maybe that sounded a bit obvious," she reconsidered. "The quattro field is all around us. All quattro in the field can feel like a stain in the world, which you can feel in your palm, almost like you can hold it. There's a stain here, below us, and it points in a direction because it was smeared into the field that way." I huffed. I held my hands in front of me in the pose, but I got no sense of a greater field. I could only sense the air which surrounded me, and the carbon and everything else. I groaned. "Oh, well, it was a good thought that I could even be taught. I am truly useless, though," I huffed semi-sarcastically. "I can't even get the first feeling of the field." "Feel it and do it," Celeste reminded me. "It's there, just believe that it is." Believe? That was something that I hadn't heard with this sort of stuff. I'd taken everything so far for granted that I'd forgotten how absurd this whole thing was. A stain in an energy field was no crazier than throwing fistfuls of high-impact air. I closed my eyes, and with my hands before me, I summoned the power of belief. "It's there," I told myself. "It's there because they said it is." I felt nothing. Not even a belief could summon a false firing of a neuron. I sighed. Damn it, guys, there's nothing. My whole being was sucked into a singularity. A great wind swept by my soul, casting it off into a storm. When I opened my eyes, I found that I was not where I was standing before. I was in front of a large iron gate, cast in the brilliant white pool of two looming industrial lights. The gate was made of thick steel beams like prison bars. Behind it, also lit in blinding white, was a massive warehouse. It extended far to the left, further than the light shone upon it, and had a massive roller door adjacent to the gate. I looked to my left, the smoke of the vision distorting as I did so. I saw a Seneva covered in warm bronze and silver armor. They had a chain tied to their back, and meaty paws with which they saluted somebody standing past me. I turned around to the guard's hut. The guard did not notice the bronze Seneva standing there, so the Seneva looked up to the camera resting atop the gate's right-hand pillar and waved into it. The security guard jolted in surprise and shook into action. "The line's foot," the guard gasped. "I didn't notice you there. Go through." "Thanks," the bronze Seneva said. Their helmet was squarish, with sharp angles. Their eyes were crimson red, bordered in the center and the top by a thick black line. It extended down their face like a striking nose, a motor word piercing the black night and the white light. The gate creaked and groaned, shifting on its rollers. "Try again, James," Celeste said. I shook my head and opened my eyes, even though I was certain that they would just open. I stood bolt upright as my eyes and ears spun in their sockets. The haze of dizziness drowned from my skull in a rush of blood. "Sweet cheese," I moaned as I gathered my bearings. "Whoa. What happened?" Natalie asked. "I know what they are," I said. "Oh, so you read the pattern too?" Natalie chuckled. "No," I burst. "God, no, I couldn't even figure that out. That's your thing." She frowned. I had a vision. I saw them by a warehouse. They were a tall bronze Seneva with a mean-looking face. They go by the name Lion's Foot. "Lion's Foot," Celeste huffed. "That's not a very traditional name." "And I know where that warehouse is," I continued. "Or I think I do. It's down by the other railway line, near the bike path that way. I swear it's the same one. I recognize the gate." "Well, how do you know that they're there now?" Natalie asked. I stumbled. Nothing about the vision told me this, really, but I was just so certain that I was just there witnessing them, and that it had to be true. "It was night in the vision," I said, "but that's probably not good evidence. I just feel that they're there." Natalie and Celeste shared a quizzical gaze. Natalie shrugged her shoulders. "It's too good of a lead to waste. Which way is this warehouse?" "Northwest. Once we hit the bike track, it's easy." "We should stop by Kuvalik's on the way," Natalie said, "just in case he's seen anything. They've been so close to his house." "Good idea," I agreed. "You finally get to meet Kuvalik, Celeste." She smiled. "I'd be honored to meet him," she said. We made our way down this dark street, under the damp orange street lights which stained the road and pavement. I stepped past the porch, collecting my key from the rusty bike's pouch, and opened the front door. Natalie and Celeste entered behind me. There was no electricity in Mr. Finnick's house. When it was dark outside, it was dark inside. I held my bike's front light in my hand and waved it down the corridor. "Kuvalik," I said as we stepped through the door. Shadows danced across the hallway as my light swung. I led the girls further into the house. "Kuvalik?" I called again. My light scanned past the back door at the end of the hall. Shadows scurried from the torch beam, except for one, illuminable and in the shape of a man. It stood still against the leaping, distorting shadows around it. "Ah!" I yelled and stumbled back. Natalie flipped back, drawing her twin swords. Celeste shrieked, stumbling further than I. "Hello, children," the illuminable man said with a cheery voice. "Oh, jeez, you scared me, Kuvalik," I panted. Natalie put away her twin swords, and Celeste stepped up to where I was. She pushed past me, between Kuvalik and I. "Mea far Kuvalik," she greeted. She drew her sword and stabbed it into the ground before her feet. Kuvalik smiled, his purple eyes appearing on his smoky head. "You must be Celeste Bouvet, Genevieve, the young Yvette whom I've heard so much about." "You have?" she asked, surprised. "Yes, James talks very highly of your abilities, and your approach to being a Seneva," he said. Celeste turned to me and smiled, her cheeks flushing red. "Why don't we all sit and have tea?" he asked. "I can put some more on." No, Kuvalik, we're in a rush," Natalie said. "We just came to ask you a question." "Where do you keep getting tea from?" I asked, bewildered. "I thought we've been drinking it all." "I go to the store and get more," he replied. "But you're a ghost." "A ghost can travel," he said. "Really? James, I'm a 600-year-old Lichtenfacher from Sparta. How do you believe I got here?" "Oh, yeah," I chuckled. "But it's hard for me to buy tea," he said, floating past us to the kitchen. His smoky essence blew past my shoulder, lingering in the air. "Often the clerk screams in fright on the sight of floating tea, and so I just walk out. I can't even pay for it." Natalie, Celeste, and I laughed at the image. Kuvalik grabbed the tea from the top shelf and dissipated his apparition, becoming invisible and leaving us with the spectacle of floating tea. "And he's making it anyway," Natalie sighed to Celeste and I. "Kuvalik, we were wondering if a Seneva came to visit you recently?" The tea set itself gently upon the table. Wisps of charcoal smoke coagulated from the thin air and whipped around to create his form. His purple eyes filled from their sockets up. "Apart from the well who gives me the running water, no." "Would this well happen to be a tall bronze Seneva with an intimidating face?" I asked. "With crimson red quattro?" Natalie added. No, they're your Yamitsa, Natalie, Kovalik said. I don't know any Seneva here by that description. Well, they came by your house, Natalie said. There was a stain of their quattro by the pavement outside your fence. I did not feel them come by, Kovalik responded. Ghosts sleep too. In fact, I sleep quite a lot, through almost anything. Natalie frowned. I don't think I'm making a very good first impression on my powerful Evar guest, Kovalik chuckled. Oh no, you're doing very well for a man of 600 years, believe me, Celeste smiled. Oh, thank you, he glowed back. We'd better get going then, Natalie said. We know where they are, we just don't know who they are. What guides your interest in them then? Kovalik asked. The call of the void, Natalie said. Destiny, the pull of the universe. I've felt the compulsion to follow their trail. Heslick is planning to destroy all the Seneva threads, and already has a thread-removing device. Plus, we're about to get targeted by Heslick's agents, I blurted to Kovalik. We think this guy knows something that we don't, and he can help us do something about the whole situation we're in. Kovalik didn't seem shocked. Instead, he sat upon the kitchen bench and pondered. He fondled a bag of tea between his ghastly fingers. That's quite a situation, he said, but I'm not surprised. Heslick has so much charm with the people, he could get away with murder and convince the world it's part of his good agenda. Still, Kovalik continued, it's brave of the three of you to follow it up, especially in the face of his agents. I wouldn't put the task beyond you three. You wouldn't? Natalie asked. By Nereos, no, Kovalik said. The three of you make a powerful team from three separate black holes, Omicronius, Amisos, and Veritas, of three macro elements, and each connected to a micro element. A team doesn't come more formidable or destined, he added. If your feeling of compulsion is right, Natalie, then I can only assume this other Seneva is of the black hole Nereos, and connected to Radek, Earth, and of some other micro element. I've long felt a great part for James and yourself, and now you too, Celeste. Good to know, Celeste said. Of course, Kovalik continued. They could be any kind of Seneva from any black hole, but if they are as I predict, then I wouldn't put it down to just pure coincidence. Why do you think we have a clear path like this? Natalie asked. Who said it's a clear path? Kovalik turned her question around. Destiny can be felt but never predicted. The path is whatever you choose it to be, or wherever you feel you're being pulled towards. It's never clear what the ultimate result of the amalgamation of your compulsions will be. Yes, of course, Natalie agreed, after pondering the words. We left Kovalik, and I led the girls through my home neighborhood on our bicycles. We cruised northwest, dodging between the few suburban travelers to the bike track. Once there, Natalie picked up on the strong scent of our Stalker's Quattro trail and confirmed that we were on the right path. We pedaled down the track and came off just before the other railway line. We stopped by the mouth of an alleyway on a no-through road. The alley bored its way between two cottages and revealed a parking lot and large iron gate at its end, bathed in white light. Behind it, illuminated by industrial lamps, I could see the outline of a warehouse against the cloudy night's sky. This is definitely it, I said. That's the gate from the vision. Good, Natalie smiled. She put her bike against the face of the alley and started to stroll down. Destiny is on our side, apparently. Celeste cringed at the comment. I lay my bike up against Natalie's and jogged after her. Celeste followed. Don't just stroll in, Natalie, I warned, grabbing her by the shoulder. There's a guard with a camera by the gate. We'll have to sneak. Why? She asked. He knows who we are. He wants to talk to us, or else he wouldn't have been following us this whole time. Well, what if they're against us, Natalie, but we're still meant to meet them? They haven't attacked us yet, remember? She asked. No, Celeste said, stepping forward to Natalie. You're making a lot of foolish assumptions right now, Natalie. Am I? She asked. If every other Seneva we've encountered is right, I leak so much Quattro that they'd have to know we're out here anyway. Celeste huffed. Don't be so defeatist or idealistic then. Right now, I'm putting a lot of trust in your feelings, Natalie, to follow the two of you out here on this suspicious trail. I trust you, but I do not trust a stranger know this place. We enter in our armor, as our Idlis, and without being seen, or we do not enter at all. Natalie rolled her eyes. We've beat Seneva 2-on-3 before. It's good to be prepared, but I don't think there's much to worry about. We're already targets. Wouldn't being in our armor make our presences stronger anyway? Would it? I turned to Celeste, but she didn't notice my glance. I agree with Celeste, I noted, anyway. We don't know why he's here, or who's in there. It doesn't look like a personal home, not even for a Seneva. Natalie huffed, reassessing the scene. She flicked her wrists, drawing her twin swords. What do we say then when we get caught sneaking into the building? Anybody who sneaks around is doing something they know is wrong. That's the whole point of sneaking. Anybody we come across will think we're just there to harm them. With this level of security, I'm not sure it matters, I said. They clearly want people out. Even them wanting us in is risky, given everything that's happened to us. Natalie frowned and huffed. Fine, she said. I don't think it's so silly to try walking in first, as I've had no bad inclinations about this place. You might not, but others here certainly do, Celeste noted. This is a team effort, and it hinges on trust. Celeste flung her bag aside and tilted her head back. Her armour spread from her thread, encapsulating her body in crimson red and gunmetal grey. Armour it is then, Natalie sighed, giving in. Together, we became Makey, Zamel and Genevieve, left our bags tucked under our bikes, and stalked along the shadow of the alley's fence towards the car park. Everything about the property appeared clean, even the gutter. Not a speck of rust hung on the gate's large bars. On the right gate post, above the security hut, was a security camera. The gate and the fence were topped with sharp, barbed wire. There was nobody in the hut. Looks clear, I said. How do we get past the camera, though? I could handle that, Zamel said. From the shadows to the left of the gate rose a snake of water. It slithered through the air slowly, wrapping around itself and twisting as it hovered. It snaked its way around the gatepost and entered the camera through the conduit. Sparks buzzed from behind the lens. The red recording light dimmed. Zamel released her soul's grip on her connection, water leaking from the camera. She led us forward. We came into the car park and sleuthed around the edge of the light white's pool. We ducked into the security hut, and I smashed its light out with my silver fist. There was a large, glowing red button sitting right in the middle of the control board. It had GATE printed on its face in black letters. I shrugged to the girls and stomped my palm upon it. An AC motor behind our heads whirred and spat. Iron creaked and dust crunched in the mechanism as the gate rolled away from the hut. Sticking to the shadows, we slipped into the compound. Huge industrial lights shone onto the warehouse, cutting through the darkness of the night. A large roller door of the facade basked in the field of white. I looked up to the towers and cursed. "You're sure that he's in there?" Celeste asked, although to whom I wasn't sure. "No," I said, but I was cut off by Samel. "He's in there," she said, her hands hanging by the side in the Seneva hand pose. "I don't know the layout of the room, but he's directly that way." She pointed straight through the roller door. "Good," I sighed. "Now we just have to worry about the lights." "I can handle that," Celeste smirked beneath her helmet. She extended her crimson hand towards the nearest lights. Her fingers twiddled at their ends as she focused on her connections. Her fingers balled up into a fist, and a disc of shade projected onto the ground. She tugged with her arm, and the bulb smashed within its housing. "Oxygen is everywhere, and elements can be manipulated from afar," she told me, preempting my question. "Although this is the extent of my soul's reach. Let's get moving." She ushered Zamel and I along the perimeter of darkness to the next light post. She committed herself to the same ritual, extending her soul out to oxygen in the lamp and using it to tear at the wire in the globe. A path to the warehouse roller door was thrown into darkness, and we ran through it towards the entrance. The door was still lit by a bulb mounted over it. With ease, Genevieve extinguished this one too, and we sleuthed along the building's face to the roller door. "Do we knock?" I asked, joking. I peered up to the height of the door. It had to have been 7 meters high at least, because there's no way we're getting through here stealthily. "There's no way around the side," Zamel said. "I looked when we came around. There's a wire fence blocking it off." "Like a fence topped in a barbed wire or a fence made of crisscross wire?" "Both," she clarified. I flicked my wrist, and from my bone and my thread my staff formed. Its long green blade glimmered in the moonlight. "I think it's finally a job for me," I grinned. I slipped around the right side of the building, with Zamel and Genevieve sneaking at my heels. I saw the fence Zamel was talking about, and past it was a switchboard and a door. Beauty, I thought. The blade of my staff was thin. I did not craft it, I did not know where it came from, but it was made of a single atom-thick diamond. Still, I doubted that I could cut clean through the wire fence. "What's your plan?" Genevieve asked me. I stood before the fence and pondered. I extended my hand to it, to feel that there was carbon in the metal. "It's an alloy," I said, "so if I take the carbon from it," I gripped my soul and ripped with my hand backwards. Black rocks were torn from the fence's structure. They coagulated in my hand. I wrapped the black mass around my arm for later use. "The structure should be weakened." I raised my staff above my head and swung down upon the fence's links. They shattered immediately, and I pushed aside the broken fencing to give us a path. I stepped in, and all followed. I walked up to the door, set into the corrugated wall by the switchboard. I tried the obvious solution first, to turn the knob. "It's locked," I frowned, "but that shouldn't be an issue." I put my palm over the lock mechanism. The door's jamb was made of steel. I grinned and yanked the carbon from it. I added the black mass to the other pile I'd accumulated before. I slipped my staff into the door crack and wedged it down. The door's bolt snapped, and I levered the staff to force the door open. The door opened into a clearing of a factory. The dusty concrete bathed in the slow sinking blue moonlight which fell from the corrugated perspex roof. This central space to the factory was voluminous and eerie. Our footsteps rang into the empty hall. We stalked into the center of the clearing. To our right were rows of floor-to-ceiling shelving aisles and a lonely forklift. To our left, between us and the roller door, was a floor of metal working machines laying in shadows. Opposite the door we entered was a mezzanine, which held an office. Light oozed through the cracks in the visible back door of the office and clung to its dusty observation windows. "Somebody's here," Zamel pointed out. Somewhere, a door opened. Light flooded into the mezzanine office behind the shadow of a figure. My mind screamed and I froze up, looking for a place to hide in the barren opening. There was a stack of pallets to our left, and Zamel, Geneve, and I all ducked behind it. We fought to squish in together out of sight. Silence fell, bar the sound of shuffling feet above. We dared not make a sound. A computer's glowing whir echoed in the space. In the office, hands tapped away at a keyboard. A mouse clicked. "What a surprise to see you here," a voice came from my right, between us and the roller door. I jumped into the air in sheer fright. Without even seeing who had spoken, I kicked off a blast of air and landed with a skid on my metal feet across the concrete. Geneve stood and her sword flamed. Zamel stood ready to strike. Amongst the factory equipment stood Vestas. He strode towards us. "Zamel, Mickey, what the hell?" Geneve growled. Her blue helical flames doubled in size. "I thought the three of you would be hard to catch, but it seems you've reconsidered my offer." "We've done no such thing," Zamel snarled. "Then why are you here?" "Oh, we didn't know you'd be here," I shrieked. "Oh, jeez, we're done for." "Done for?" Vestas asked. "Makey, there are only good things in your future. Lion's foot," he called over our heads. "Help me show our guest to the lab." Behind me, metal clanged, a chain unfurling onto the cold concrete floor. It echoed sharply. I stiffened up and against my will turned to face it. In an aisle, bordered on either side by tall stacks of boxes, was a tall bronze Ceneva. Their eyes were blood red, with black lining forming a menacing face. Their red gaze broke the blue glow of the night. Their bronze and silver armor was bulky and sleek. Their lower right leg, in its armored form, appeared to be prosthetic. They held their gaze on mine. The chain, at its full length, hovered before them. "Ah, shit," Zamel cussed. Vestas student Surulik ran from the office onto the mezzanine balcony, followed by their Iver friend, Faraver. They leaped down from the looking platform to join us on the floor of the factory. "I wouldn't give up the high ground so easily," Geneve spat. "You needed your red flames, Salefa." I didn't know what her insult meant, but it sure as hell riled up Faraver. Plasma of red, hot flames dripped off their armored fingers like molten metal. "Now, nobody said anything about fighting," Vestas said, but was cut off by Geneve. "I did, right now. You want me? Come and get me." She shot 2 bolts of bright blue quattro in quick succession. Dum dum! One at Vestas and the other at Faraver. Both dodged, but Faraver fired in retaliation. A bolt of hot crimson quattro streaked past my helmet. I turned to the bronze Ceneva, his palm returning to his side. He stomped a massive bronze foot down into the concrete and gripped at the wall around him through his soul connection. A crack ripped through the stone floor, extending from his toes. He heaved upwards, and suddenly my knees were rocketing towards my chest. The ground had burst open, and a platform of rock blasted upwards under me. I jumped from the pile, using its momentum and blasting off a jet of air. I soared high over the factory floor, towards the tall metal shelving above Lion's foot. I extended my claws and gripped into the first bit of metal I could touch. Clinging halfway up the shelving, the massive unit lurched under me, threatening to topple. I leaped from it, pushing my way over to the next stack. A bolt of red quattro flew to where I had just been. A patch of metal burned hot and melted as the energy dissipated through it. I landed on the next wall, only to see another bolt flying towards me from below. As soon as my claws had gripped onto a shelf, I found myself pushing off again. I vaulted past the wall, swung back into the aisle center, narrowly avoiding a bolt which crashed into a box by my feet. It set on fire. Something cold wrapped around my ankle as I flew. It wrenched at my foot and tore it backwards. I yelped in pain and surprise. Lion's foot had me by his chain, and he pulled me from the sky. I was whipped into the concrete flooring like a rag doll. I tried to blast air under my body as I landed, but it didn't do enough to lessen the impact. I smashed across the ground, coughing and spluttering. I could feel my right shoulder screaming in pain under the armor of Makey. I flopped onto my back, wanting nothing more than to lay there and wallow in my pity. I saw him there, Lion's foot bearing over me. He was tall and he was thick. He had strength beyond what I knew was possible. "I can't beat this guy with air. Who am I kidding?" I spluttered to myself. The chain yanked again at my leg and it kicked me out of the sleep and into action. I swung my torso off the floor and smashed my blade down onto the chain. The link cracked, and as Lion's foot pulled at the chain, it snapped. I jumped up, landing on my feet, and kicked the excess linkage off. It soared through the air, like a well-aimed shot on goal, straight into his hand. "Thanks," he said, attaching it back to his end, melding the metal together like putty in his fingers. "No worries," I said with a smile. We were both smiling. We caught ourselves smiling through our helmets, and frowned. He grasped before him with his left hand and flung it in my direction. A boulder tore from the ground by his foot and slammed towards me. I kicked a blast of air at it, but nothing happened. I scrambled out of its path now, flying onto the wall of shelving as the boulder crashed down the aisle. Behind Lion's foot, down the aisle, I could see Zamel and Genevieve being drawn apart from each other and shepherded away from exits. The same had been done to me, I realised. We'd been isolated. All three Seneva rushed to where Geneva was drawn. She was being ambushed, hard. Blue flames tore across the roof of the building. Their light spilled into every corner. I have to help her, I thought, but air is useless against this guy. It's too weak. It won't work. I need something stronger. I need to have a stronger stance, like him. Like Dad, an intrusion echoed in my head. I blinked, stunned at my own thoughts. Big and strong, like Dad, I agreed. A pillar of concrete cracked towards me. Like a game of dodgeball, Lion's foot threw the distraction and fired his deadly bolt just as I leaped away from the stone. I extended my hand towards the bolt, but missed. It sailed over me as I crashed into the wall. I got straight up, almost be rammed in the guts by another boulder. I swatted at it with my diamond-edged blade, and the stone cracked into 2 pieces. Their bolt came at me again, but this time I spun my staff in front of me to catch it. It raced hot through my veins, and pivoting on my back foot, I rejected it with a dose of my own quadra and sent a toxicated bolt back his way. Doom! He whipped the bolt out of the air with his chain. It burned hot where it was absorbed, but he held the linkages together with his connection to their metal. I whipped my staff around my body, digging my feet firmly into the ground, and threw a blast of wind towards him. The force was enough to make my metal feet slide. I gritted my teeth behind my helmet and gripped in. Not an ounce of the bronze Seneva was moved. Alright, fine. Air is useless. Ignore it, I thought to myself. I've got carbon. I have to be strong. I clawed at the carbon I'd wrapped around my arm. A quattrobolt came by and I had to shift my attention again. No time for that. I cast fuck it. I lunged to my left and dug my claws into a sizable box, digging my feet in, adopting my new unwavering stance. I ripped it from the shelf and launched it at the Seneva. He was shocked by my decision. He was used to dealing with electricity, the elements, and bolts of quattro, but not a box. He tried to swat it out of the air with his bulky bronze arm, but the weight of it was more than he'd expected. He stumbled as it crashed into him. By the time he'd regained himself, I had a pallet on the tip of my long dagger-like fingers. I threw it straight at him. This time, prepared, he flicked his armoured hand and struck it with the end of his chain. The chain whipped around the pallet and cracked it in half. It crashed to the floor. He grinned at me and gripped into the wall around him with his meaty metal mitts. He heaved across his body. A pillar of concrete rushed from the ground to my right and jammed itself into my hip. I stumbled off my firm footing, but replanted my foot, determined to be strong. Another pillar punched me in the back, and I fell forward onto my face. His foot stomped on the ground hard, and I feared his next move. My mind was desperate. Boxes are full of carbon, I reasoned. Miss Gordon's lessons flooding in. Amongst hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, possibly some other stuff. It's all in trees, right? If I pull at the carbon, will all the boxes fall down? I felt the earth shifting. I didn't have time to further reason with myself. I focused on my soul's reach and used it to rip at the carbon in all of the boxes I could grab. I rolled over and pushed myself away from Lion's foot. Chunks of graphite flung towards me. Behind them, in their wake, was a powerful explosion of plasma and flames. The fire roared bright yellow. Metal groaned. Pieces of boxes, like hot lava, rained from the shelves which bent inwards above my head. Shit, I augured the mess. My instinct was to jump, but the air made me weak, right? I didn't need it. Carbon made me strong, it seemed. I gathered the graphite from the boxes and crudely formed it into a disc. Leaping to my feet, like a battering ram, I held it in front of me and charged at the shelving to my right. I burst through the wall of fire, protected by my shield, and skidded across the floor of the next aisle. I kicked into a sprint, heading towards Geneva in the clearing. Behind me was a mighty roar of metal. Shelving collapsed as fire blazed under them. The walls crashed halfway into the aisle before being ejected back out. Large footsteps stomped behind me. A chain cracked in the dust. I spotted Geneve. 3 Senevas surrounded her now, backing her into a corner of the far side of the factory. She swung her sword and sparked a whip of blue-hot fire. It did little to deter her attackers, who advanced further. Zamel was just to my left, amongst the machines, fighting somebody else. "Run!" I yelled. I blasted a bolt at Zamel's attacker and 2 towards Geneve. One of Geneve's attackers turned and engaged me in fire. I sprinted towards them, fearless. They fired a foul shot. I fired one just as inaccurately. Another Seneva turned, Faraver. They cast a bright red jet of flame towards me, but I held my shield to it and defended with a bolt of quattro. The graphite shield went up in flames faster than I could hold it together. Ah, damn it. I launched its remains at my attackers, hoping to bowl them over, just steps from the action, steps from tackling one of the Senaver and saving Genevieve. I heard the distinctive crack and rumble of concrete. I sensed the protrusion, a disturbance in the air in front of me, a huge blip on my radar as it rose from the ground. My reluctance to accept the help of air had caught up to me. There was no time to think of what it could have done before the pillar of earth rammed into my stomach with the force of a truck. It hit me front on. My body slopped over it, and I was flung backwards through the factory. I landed on my back with a hideous thud. I scraped across the concrete floor like nails across a chalkboard. My head slumped onto the stone. Heads turned to me. I don't suppose you've watched TV shows and movies where the main character gets thrown like halfway across a room by an explosion and just grunts or makes a noise to indicate mild irritation. I wish that I could report that I grunted, stood up, brushed myself off, and got back into action. But that's a bullshit expectation. I screamed. The pain was overwhelming and infinite. My concept of time blasted from my body. I gasped for breath between my weak cries. I had been winded. The armor on my stomach wasn't dinted, but it had been badly scratched. I grasped at it with my claws. I couldn't ease the pain. Beyond that, I felt like my soul had been injured. I felt depressed, both emotionally and energetically. My mind was filled with sorrow. I wallowed on the floor, groaning, screaming. The distraction of my dramatic demise gave Genevieve time and a chance to strike. She brandished her sword in both fists and used it to backhand her attackers with its flaming edge in one swoop. They each spun and stumbled, grasping their helmets. Genevieve used a clawed foot to kick Faraver back into the others, then kicked off like lightning, sprinting for the side door. She ran and skidded on her insectoid feet to face me. She looked to me, then back to the captors, who appeared to be getting up. I could see her bouncing between her feet, considering what to do, before choosing to run. She blasted at Zamel's attacker, forcing them to face Genevieve, which allowed Zamel to toss them aside with her twin swords. Zamel paused, staring at me. She went to turn in my direction, but Genevieve grabbed her solidly by the arm and yanked her away towards the door. It slammed behind them, and nobody followed. Crashing footsteps caused me to bounce on the hard floor. I spluttered, the vibrations doing nothing to take the pain away. I stopped screaming now and was just wailing, much manlier, it seemed. Lion's foot knelt beside me. "Don't fight it," he said to me. A bolt of quattro ran straight from his hand into my armored chest. It raced up to my thread, and I did as he said. My armor shattered off my body, and the intense emotional pain followed it, crumbling to the floor like broken glass. I wheezed, sucking in a huge breath. My stomach was bruised. I could feel it. Most of the pain was gone now, but there was still enough that I sat up to spit out bile. "They'll be back," Vesta said, eyeing the side entrance. I could see it in Zamel's gaze.